The fact that banks are still able to issue an unlimited amount of credit to their clients and in this way support the bubble. And in a world in which silver becomes money again.
Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Silver has broken out and is about $38 per ounce at the time that we recorded this, which makes many people wonder, what will a silver squeeze look like? I am joined by Oren, also known as the Silver Hermit, to consider what the end game for silver could look like. Oren, welcome back. How's it going today?
Hello, everything is fine. How do you do?
I'm doing great. So, how would we know that a silver squeeze had started?
Okay, I think we should start this show by warning people that, on this show, we're going to allow ourselves to be a bit more speculative and a bit less cautious than usual, and just give you our wild predictions as to what may happen when we do get a silver squeeze and when silver really breaks out. So I just want to tell people to, take everything in this show with a grain of salt. These are just theories of ours. What is a silver squeeze? I think it's a term which is being used very often, but I think most people don't really understand uh, how it will look or how it will unfold. A silver squeeze is very different from a short squeeze, a regular short squeeze. In a short squeeze, the shorts are overwhelmed by people purchasing whatever it is, a stock, some kind of an asset. There's not enough of it. The amount is limited, so the shorts have to bail out. They have to close their positions. And how do they do that? In order to close a short position, you of course need to buy the underlying asset. So there's suddenly you see the spike in the price because people need to buy the assets in order to close their short positions. And with silver, it's not going to work this way because on the COMEX, theoretically, those big banks who are active in the precious metals market, they can sell you as many short contracts, short futures contracts as they wish. There's no, theoretically, there's no limit on the amount of short contracts that they can generate. And of course, in order to for you to buy a long contract, someone has to buy a short contract because the two are created together. So theoretically, the big banks can sell you any amount of silver that you want to buy. We're talking about paper silver on the COMEX on the futures market. What they do is they loan or they buy silver from London, physical silver, as though physical silver from London, and they sell you a futures contract. And as though they are balanced because they have silver in London and they're selling you a futures contract in New York. But we suspect that the LBMA doesn't hold enough silver to back all those contracts because, it's using a fractional reserve system. It has only a small float, a limited amount of physical silver, and it keeps selling it again and again to multiple owners. And, eventually, if no one comes asking for the physical silver, then this shell game can continue indefinitely.
Yeah, they can just keep it going forever.
Yes. So a real silver squeeze will only happen once enough people ask for physical delivery. Enough people asking for standing for physical delivery means that the banks don't have enough to supply because eventually, the amount of silver available to be delivered is very small compared to the amount of contracts exchanging hands, even on a daily basis, as we've recently, as we've seen recently. I mean,
Right.
Just recently, I've posted about it on X, and it got a bit viral. That there was
Yes.
an hour, just one single hour, in which 483 million ounces of silver were traded on the COMEX. This happened just right after a breakout, a significant breakout. I'm assuming in an attempt to suppress that breakout, and it didn't work. The price jumped soon after, reaching $39 an ounce.
And so now all of those shorts are underwater, as you had pointed out in the post. And this is estimated to be about 57% of the annual mine supply.
Crazy, crazy numbers. I mean, like, it's
A-
insane that you
Absolutely.
can sell more than half of the annual mine supply within an hour. But it can only be done because people are not asking for physical delivery. They're settling in cash at the end of the month. So you can continue this game.
And sometimes people will say, okay, well, let's say they start running out, where is the additional silver going to come from? Like, can this be filled? This tight supply situation. And of course, the demand for silver hasn't been slowing down. Now, the current above ground stockpile of investment grade silver could easily get wiped out by investors. And why would I say that? Well, I asked an AI to estimate the total value of all the investment grade silver globally, and it came up with a figure of $1.5 trillion dollars. Well, Apple has a market cap of 3.13 trillion. If you could imagine just half of the money invested in just Apple poured into the silver market, it could wipe it out. But
Yes.
there,
And probably the true value of that above ground investment grade silver, it's probably even lower than that. Those estimates are usually quite generous.
yeah, so that's important to keep in mind too. But I mean, there's seven companies with a market cap that would be higher than that already high estimate. Um, it just gives you an idea of how small this market really is. I mean, it would seem likely if a lot of investors start to get interested in silver, it could cause the price to move up very quickly.
You can buy the entire annual mine supply for about $32 billion. That's nothing.
Right. In today's markets, that's nothing.
That's nothing. So a silver squeeze will only take place, once enough people demand physical delivery. And as it happens, the exchange, the COMEX, is not obliged to deliver all that physical silver. If enough people ask for physical delivery, it can just decline. It can force them to settle in cash. And this is the silver squeeze. As far as I'm concerned, this is exactly what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for the COMEX to admit that it cannot deliver physical silver. And I expect that once this declaration comes, once this admission that there is a shortage of silver, once it comes, then you're going to see a rush to acquire physical silver. And I expect there to be a run on physical silver. And I expect there to be, the shells of every bullion dealer in the world will be wiped out overnight.
Yeah, absolutely. The market is positioned to get wiped out, by a scenario like this. Of course, they can settle out all those contracts in cash. And so they can just shut that whole system down. Um, at the blink of an eye if they want to, and they're not going to have to worry about that.
I suspect that, for instance, you're a silver stacker and you get up in the morning and you may read on X some post that the COMEX has forced uh, uh, cash settlement, that it
Okay.
defaulted on physical delivery. Someone defaulted on physical delivery, and there was a forced cash settlement. And it's going to be it's going to be quite obscure. Very few people are going to even hear about it. only the people who are interested in precious metals to begin with. And then you may enter, for instance, your online dealer, the website you usually buy silver from, and it's going to be unavailable. Or
Right.
perhaps it's going to be a small notice. Oh, we're out of supply. Please come back later. Something like that.
Right. Would you like to place an order, possibly if they know they got some stuff coming in, but they could go in and wipe out those online dealers really quick. And
Yeah.
who knows? It could just be a lot of investors. It could be industry. Whoever gets panicked. Yeah,
Yes, I expect, those who were not able to get physical silver from the COMEX, I expect them to go to every other. I expect them to panic. I expect them to go to every bullion dealer across the world and buy whatever is available for sale.
that makes sense. And of course, I mean, we are talking about big players. They were trying to take 5,000-ounce bars off the COMEX. And
They'll buy whatever is possible, whatever is
right.
available. They'll buy the 100-ounce bars, the 10-ounce bars. They'll even buy the coins if they are desperate enough.
Sure, sure, absolutely. And they're going to have a lot of money to throw around, in a coin shop environment, like, let's say, or a big online dealer.
So the big mystery, I think, is what will be the official price in such a situation. I suspect that if you check the official price, it won't change. It will be, look, if I were the COMEX and I knew that there is a panic taking place, there is a run on physical silver, I wouldn't advertise it by publishing the true price of silver. I would just post $30, $40, just, the price of the previous day. How will it manifest itself? Only in the premiums. I think the premiums will start skyrocketing to such an extent that perhaps they're going to be multiples of the official price.
That's interesting. I mean, and I could totally see that happening where the price for physical just detaches from the paper price. Everyone just recognizes that's not the real price you'll pay, and they just kind of start ignoring it. I could totally see a scenario like that.
Yes, yes. This is what we call the bifurcation, and it has been predicted, long ago by analysts, far more experienced than you and I.
Right.
And yes, and I wouldn't be surprised if you enter, for instance, AppMax, and there's going to be very, very few products that you can buy, and the price is going to be outrageous. I mean, like multiples of the official price. So only the very desperate people going to buy silver in such a situation.
Right, absolutely. And I could see um even jewelry items selling for who knows, three, four times what they should be in an environment like that where people are just scrambling to find anything that they can. Of course, if the price rises enough, you'll see certain industries start to pick up. And I think that some folks are thinking, well, if the price rises enough, eventually recycling would really start to pick up, for example. But I do question if recycling could actually like effectively fill that void in the silver market if something like this was going on. Recycling a cell phone, for example, doesn't seem very efficient to me, especially for a situation like this where there's a lot of people looking for the metal. I mean, it's been estimated the average cell phone has about 0.34 grams of silver in it. I know some estimates are lower than that, but let's just say if 0.34 was the number, well, in order to get 1 troy ounce of silver from recycled cell phones, you'd have to recycle about 93 of them. Um, a- and so if you could imagine, I mean, some individuals would start to engage in, extracting precious metals from the old printed circuit boards and things like that, in phones or computers or whatever. But it's really going to have to be companies that do the heavy lifting in regards to bringing any noticeable amount of silver to the market through, recycling e-waste. So I just I don't see that doing anything.
Yes, so the recycling is a very interesting point. because there's a limited capacity, recycling capacity. If you think about the large refineries in Switzerland, the leading refineries, they can only refine so much silver every year. They just don't have the machinery and the manpower to do that, to increase that capacity, for instance, threefold or tenfold. They just can't do that. So no matter if you get people trying to sell, suddenly you get a price spike, and people want to sell their old silverware back to be refined to, three nines or more. Investment grade silver, there's not enough refining capacity to do that. So there's only going to be a trickle of new investment grade products to answer that increased
The,
investment demand. So and at the same time, you and I have discussed at length the fact that the mining industry is insensitive to the price of silver. It's unable to respond. If the price spikes, as we've described, it is unable to increase production to a meaningful degree. So I expect there to be a dramatic increase in investment demand. And the industry is going to be overwhelmed. There's not going to be not there won't be it won't be able to respond, not from new supply coming from mines, nor from the recycling side of the industry. So there's just going to be a very small trickle of product coming to the market, not enough to answer that investment demand. And so that initial spike, which I described, I think it's just going to be the beginning of the bull market in silver.
right. Yeah. The silver market is not going to be able to effectively respond to this situation by increased mining or increased recycling. Just not going to be in the cards. And even once it does pick up, it's not going to be noticeable, even if they do start recycling more, during this upcoming cycle.
So from that point on, I expect there to be, this self-reinforcing loop. And, I discussed this, and I've created a chart which demonstrates this idea in a recent video that I made. It's called Explosive, and it talks about the explosive potential of silver. And I advise that I recommend that everyone check it out because it's a short video, and it really illustrates it, visually.
Yeah, definitely
How
check it out. I'll leave a link to it in the description.
Thanks. So I think that the increased investment demand and the fact that supply is so limited, it's going to create this self-reinforcing loop in which the rising price generates more investment demand, which generates a higher price, which generates more investment demand. And it's just going to, it's going to be self-reinforcing until the point in which the price is so high that it becomes prohibitively expensive. I mean, right now, silver is still very, very cheap if you compare it to the amount of dollars just slushing around there in the market. I mean, like the price would
Absolutely.
have to be many multiples of the current price in order to, force people to buy less. Because right now, the average person can just, enter a coin shop and just buy 100 ounces, buy
Right?
even, you know, 10 ounces, 100 ounces. Just imagine that the price needs to rise significantly so that people will be forced to, settle for 1 ounce, 2 ounces, as they do with gold, for instance.
Right. In these situations, there's only going to be so many things they can invest in. And so I do see a situation where even people might start going after the jewelry and the silverware, just anything that they know has silver in it. Um, and so just keep that in mind, folks. If you're gonna sell your old silverware, you might want to check what the spot price looks like that day.
And by the way, I wouldn't want to be a buyer in such a market because suddenly you're going to have all sorts of scammers. And of course, when the price rises, when there's a rush into a market, you suddenly see all those frauds coming out of the woodwork, and people are going to, try to sell you fake coins. And those who are not experienced stackers, they are going to be at a disadvantage. So it's best to stack your silver before this mania begins.
People do need to be careful. I've seen multiple times where people were posting on Reddit, "Oh, I found this great deal on Silver Eagles on eBay and it was like, $2 under spot or something like that." And then, of course, everyone on Reddit, all the experienced stackers are like, "Don't buy that. It's fake. I promise it's fake. Don't buy it."
Yeah.
Because people that are just coming into the market for the first time, they really fall for those scams.
I have to admit, I've seen, not physically, but I have seen pictures online of fake coins who looked pretty genuine to me. The design was right, the color was right, the texture was right, and someone wrote at the comments that it's a fake coin, but I couldn't, without serious examination, I wouldn't be able to tell.
Yeah, some of them you will not be able to tell. You will need to, um, if you bought coins, and you should probably do it anytime, but especially if it's not from a trusted seller that you're familiar with, run a magnet over them, weigh them, see if the weight's correct. Do everything you can to test it at home. You can ping it if you wanted to. And if anyone's ever really concerned, most coin shops will have a Sigma, and you could walk in there and ask them if they could determine if it's fake or not for you.
And if you're not sure, just go with a trusted dealer, someone big, someone respectable that has, there's a very low probability that is going to try and scam people.
And of course, walking into a coin shop's always good as well. And not that people haven't received fake coins from coin shops or trusted dealers; they slip through here and there. But for the most part, you're going to be good to go.
Yeah, so let's continue. So I think that if the price of silver really starts running, and I think it's going to be, dominated by investment demand. I think this will effectively remonetize silver. I, I don't know if the governments of the world will officially recognize silver as money, but I think people will start using it as money, and I suspect that this will coincide with a decline in the purchasing power of the dollar. And I think the fact that people will be scrambling to ditch their dollars and exchange them, for instance, for silver, I think that's going to speed up the velocity of those dollars in circulation. And, this
Sure.
is going to lead to very high inflation, perhaps even a hyperinflation of the dollar. And this idea as though the increasing velocity of the dollar is more important even than the quantity of dollars in circulation because it creates the feeling, the appearance as though there are more dollars. So I expect as silver becomes money again, I expect the fiat dollar to lose value very rapidly.
I think we're probably going to see the GSR break under 50. And the reason I say that is because over the last 15 years, we saw it dip under 50, for multiple months during the second half of 2010 and in early 2011. So I think it's likely we'll see that again, in this cycle. But of course, I mean, and nothing's guaranteed, but that's just me looking back. But I feel like it could go much lower than that as well, especially if we're experiencing a high inflation situation, like a hyperinflation situation. Um, and so if we're also in a situation at the same time where investors have wiped out the physical supply, And let's just say people are paying a lot more than they should for jewelry, I would probably be feeling pretty risky about the conditions I would be looking for to potentially sell my silver in that environment. And so I'd be looking for the GSR to break, way down in the 30s, the 20s, maybe lower. But I would really want to try and capitalize on a situation like that.
Yes, I agree completely. I think gold and silver, excuse me, gold and platinum will follow suit. I think they will do well. Their prices will rise as well, but I think silver will outperform them both. And I do think, as you say, I do think that the gold to silver ratio will decline, and that will it will probably return to its historical value. I mean, like seeing a 1 to 15 ratio makes perfect sense to me because this is the historic value. And if we look at the mining ratio, it's even lower than that. It's 1 to 7. So why
Right.
should we not see a return of the gold to silver ratio back to historic levels?
Right. Absolutely. Uh, I, 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 I don't know why we might not see that. If all the conditions are there, it just seems like it could go, you know, parabolic in regards to the price.
Now, I wanted to discuss, the economic implications of such a silver squeeze and how it may affect the economy as a whole. Now, I think that this effectively will mean that the current monetary system no longer exists. And, I think that banks may collapse. And I think that those who will survive the ordeal, they will no longer be able to issue unlimited amounts of credit as they can do today, because nowadays there's no boundary on the amount of credit that they can extend to their clients. And when silver becomes money again, then suddenly they have to, even if we still have paper currency, it has to be backed by physical silver. So there's a limit on the amount of credit that can be issued. And that's a completely different economy than the one we're used to. For instance, if you want to buy a house and you you won't be able to get $1 million mortgage for it. So house prices will have to come down, and corporations will not be able to uh, borrow an unlimited amount of money also. So they're going to have to limit their operations only to the most profitable projects that they can prove in advance that they're going to be profitable. They won't be able to engage in unprofitable projects as we've seen in recent years.
That would be interesting to see that system, kind of falling apart. And I know you had brought up gold and platinum and real estate. I would want to point out to people if there had been significant inflation and I was looking at some of these other markets and let's just say I had sold my silver or I was thinking about exchanging it. If you take your profits and put them into a fiat currency in an environment like that, you're going to want to transition that into something else as quickly as possible. And it does look like, at least here in the US, we could be lining up for a decent correction in the housing market soon. It looks like it's possible they're going to fire Powell. If the new person who's brought in doesn't cut rates too aggressively, and we still have some pretty high rates going into the winter, we'll probably see housing go down in price. And a lot of folks out there have been waiting for that. Some people have been calling for a pretty big correction in housing. Having said that, it could be a great time to put those profits into silver. Let's just say there is a housing correction that runs for a few years and the silver price goes up a lot. Um, but on the other hand, you might want to be considering other hard assets. And you had mentioned gold and platinum. Do you think copper is something else that would be going up a lot in price in an environment like that?
No, I
Or
don't think so. And not initially, at least, because copper is still primarily an industrial metal. It will remain an industrial metal. And if you're going through this financial crisis, which I do expect as a result of that silver squeeze, then industrial demand is going to fall, at least initially. And I think
that
other
makes sense.
commodities other commodities, which are not monetary, you could see an initial decline in their price. So I wouldn't want to be holding a lot of copper or copper-related miners at that stage of the crisis.
Gotcha.
Maybe later, maybe after things settle down, and maybe, when we go back to a more conservative kind of economy in which the prices of commodities are not suppressed. Maybe then, once we get growth again, once we get the economy going again, then perhaps other commodities such as crude oil and copper are going to be more profitable. But at those initial stages, when you're in the midst of of a crisis, I'd stick with gold and silver.
Okay, gotcha. So if someone was to sell silver at that point, it sounds like the best thing to do would be sell it for what you needed, for your daily goods or your food or paying for your shelter or things like that. Um, I do think it could be possible that somebody might be able to transition to a good piece of land or maybe a home, depending on the situation. What would you think about someone transitioning from silver to gold? Let's say if the GSR broke all the way down to like 15 to 1.
Yeah, that makes sense to slowly transition. If the GSR really falls down, to slowly and gradually transition to gold, because gold is probably going to be more stable and continue to serve as money alongside silver. Another thing that I wanted to address is amazing data point that I have here. We were talking about credit and just the huge amounts of credit which are sloshing around right now in the markets. And I just saw that the amount of margin debt right now, which is effectively money which brokers and banks are lending to investors so that they can invest it in the stock market. It has reached $556 billion dollars, and
Oh
that's
my
an
God.
all-time high. So if you're asking me what is currently holding the stock market at an all-time high, this is it. It is the fact that banks are still able to issue an unlimited amount of credit to their clients and this way support the bubble. And in a world in which silver becomes money again, that won't be the case. You won't be able to get to loan to borrow money in order to invest in the stock market. I expect interest rates to be much higher, and it just won't make sense for banks to lend you money to do such a thing. So I expect the stock market either to crash completely, or if not, then just to move sideways for a number of years, and then it doesn't crash on on nominal terms, but it does crash in real terms.
Gotcha. Yeah, what do you think about the potential for them? Let's just say if somebody came in and they did start doing a lot of like aggressive rate cuts here in the US. What do you think the effects of something like that would be? It,
I,
you
I
know,
think I think that would be extremely inflationary. I think it would just bring, it would bring the silver squeeze even faster, even sooner. Why do people flock to gold and silver right now? Because they're afraid of those government deficits, and they are afraid that right now
right?
the Federal Reserve is not funding, is not doing QE and is not funding those deficits. But if bond yields will rise enough and threaten to bankrupt the federal government, then the Fed will have no choice but to step in and resume QE and, bail out the federal government. So I think that's what people are so afraid of. They're fearful that the Fed will be forced to resume that easy money policy, and that would lead to another wave of inflation, and that would lead to the prices of all commodities absolutely skyrocketing. So I think this is why people are investing in gold and silver. And eventually, this increased investment demand, this is what is going to lead to that silver squeeze that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And people do still recognize them as safe haven assets, that there's enough of them out there. There's enough awareness of that, that absolutely something like money printing, when there's already clearly been high inflation. Um, and then, of course, we have this other situation where wages aren't keeping up. So people are going to start noticing this.
Yes. So we've spoken about what may happen to the banks in a situation of a silver squeeze. Now let's talk about how governments will do, how governments will have to react. And again, the credit won't be as available as it is today. So governments, they won't be able to run deficits anymore. They will be forced to balance their budgets. So
Right.
just imagine,
So,
there's so many government employees nowadays making excellent salaries and getting excellent benefits.
benefits. Hmm.
Yeah, sure. The
And
government won't be able to employ so many people.
right. And will they be able to keep as many people on welfare? Will they be able to keep as many people on these entitlement programs?
Yes, definitely. They won't be able to do that. It's going to be impossible. If you have to balance your budget and you can't run any deficits, now that means you have to slash those entitlements or, pay them with paper dollars, which are practically worthless. So either way, people won't be able to live on welfare anymore, and that includes people who receive a government pension and people who live on or expect to live on Social Security and all those welfare checks, everything. I expect everything to be gone almost overnight.
It wouldn't surprise me at all if you're right. And you could imagine a situation where these desperate people, um, could potentially be going out there, um, trying to find, any form of something that they even think resembles money. And I know copper isn't a monetary metal, but because it was in the pennies, people that they would be looking to rip a copper tubing out of walls, just to get anything that might provide some sort of relief if they could resell it at the new inflated prices. And I mean, it might be anything. It might be a stack of bricks or just any hard asset that they think might have rode that inflation that they could resell, just to get their hands on some money.
Yes. And I don't expect it to be pretty. I think it's going to be terrible. I think you're going to have riots in the streets. I think all those people who are currently dependent on government benefits are going to be out in the streets protesting, but there's nothing to do. The government won't have enough silver to feed them, clothe them, house them as it has today.
Right.
Nowadays, the government can just print unlimited amounts of paper currency and use it to support all these people who are living on benefits. And that power is going to be gone eventually.
What do you think will happen to silver, like in the market? Like, how do you think a situation like this would affect corporations that make um, items that are dependent on silver, like, computers, cell phones, things like that?
Okay, so corporations, they either won't be able to afford silver at all, or if they're making high-end products, such as for instance, consumer electronics, then I expect them to, pay for silver through the nose. I expect them to, if they're using it very sparingly, and if there are only fractions of a gram of silver inside each and every iPhone, so I expect them to continue producing them, but the prices of those products will be much more expensive, and they'll probably produce less of them because there's going to be less of a demand. And so I expect consumer electronics to become something more rare, and perhaps, only rich people will be able to afford owning those items.
So if you have a silver chain and a cell phone in this environment, you're doing very good.
Yeah, perhaps having a cell phone will again become a status symbol. Only rich people will be able to afford them, or have a flat screen TV, or even have internet connection at your home. I think these services will become something only for the rich, only for rich people and stackers.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And who knows really far down the road, um, what this might look like. I do wonder sometimes, let's say, but long after we're dead and gone, because they'll keep recycling stuff. They'll dig up the old cooling rods. And so there will be silver out there, and I could see an environment where it's unrecognizable to today. Possibly even more precious, considered to be more precious than gold at some point.
Yes. And if we're talking about corporations in general, I expect them to change the way they operate. I expect them to become a lot more conservative. Nowadays, you see corporations embarking on projects which are, hardly profitable, simply because they can get credit, uh, for practically nothing. They can
Right?
borrow money for practically nothing. So in such a situation, there are many unprofitable projects which seem to make sense when you can borrow money so cheaply. But as interest rates rise and as credit becomes more scarce, suddenly you have to reconsider each and every project and make sure that it's really going to be profitable. And you have to conduct yourself in a far more conservative way. So they're going to have fewer workers, and I think they're going to, the benefits are going to be less lavish, and I think it's going to be a very different world than the one we're seeing today. And I'm saying it with a smile on my face because, but it's going to be tough. I'm not kidding. I don't want to give anyone the false impression. It's not going to be easy to live in such a world. Although silver stackers will benefit from such a scenario tremendously, but other people will do very badly in such a world.
You can imagine being a big consuming country. Once a significant amount of buying stops, I believe what you're saying about corporations would affect corporations on the other side of the world who had access to this market previously. That they're going to start having to be a lot more conservative. Um,
If you're asking me about China and other countries who are currently relying on exporting cheap products to the US, they will
yes.
definitely have to change their business model, their economic model. They won't be able to rely on exports. They'll have to rely on the local markets, and their own people will start consuming those products. Maybe they will produce a little less, but their own people will be the ones to benefit from those products.
So what do you think the world will be like in this environment globally? Like, do you think there will be a lot of conflict? Will this affect war?
Yes. So last but not least, I think it will actually has the potential to pacify the world. Why? Because nowadays war is a very expensive thing. It always was a very expensive thing. And nowadays we're able to fund wars through the printing of currency. And we're able to have these endless wars, those infinite wars that last for years and years. Now, I want to remind people that prior to the 20th century, wars were limited. Even those wars which lasted for years usually only had a few decisive battles and which were, you know, it impacted, it did not impact the people living in the cities, for instance. You've had two armies fighting in some fields somewhere, and the amount of civilian casualties were limited. So I hope that the world will become a much more peaceful place if governments are no longer able to fund those infinite wars, and if they do embark on some conflict, it will have to be limited both in scope and in length. And I expect the world to be a more peaceful place. And that could be the the best thing about this entire scenario of a civil squeeze.
So at least it'll be a more peaceful world.
Yes, I certainly hope so. Now, I know that everything that we've explained here today, it sounds kind of crazy. It sounds like a very different world than the one that we're living in. And it sounds crazy that as though all that can happen just due to the scarcity of a single metal. But it all makes sense to me. Like one event leads to the other. It's like this sequence of events that is, you know, every event leads to the other because, it's like this logical sequence that I think this can actually happen.
Yeah, it's all tied together. It's all part of the same banking system. It's all the same governments, all the normal players that we think of. And so it is all linked in this way.
I think that having a more conservative economy and having a more peaceful world is what we need to do. I actually think it's going to, you know, pull humanity away from the brink of self-destruction, and it's going to set humanity on a better path. Now, it's going to be difficult at first, definitely. We're going to have to suffer through an economic crisis and perhaps through a hyperinflation. So that's going to be very painful to many people who have their entire, wealth in the bank or in the stock market, in tech stocks. I think it's going to be very painful to them. But those of us who have some physical assets and have some skills, some real skills that can be employed in the real economy, in the real world, I think we're going to benefit from it. So there are dangers, but there is also hope.
Right, absolutely. Uh, it is a very important metal, and when you buy it and you hold it, you're taking a lot of that power into your own hands. And in an environment like this, that's something that would be clear. Well, Oren, I appreciate you coming on to share your thoughts on this situation. To everyone who watched today, I want to thank each and every one of you. Please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And I hope you all have a great day out there.